Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back for another episode. This is Frank Agin, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Thanks for tuning in and thanks for subscribing. Today I want to, I'll kick it off by touching on what is known as the Pareto Principle. And the Pareto Principle, which is essentially the 80-20 rule, essentially says that 80% of our results comes from 20% of our activities. 20% of your clients account for 80% of your revenues, and they've showed this not just in the business world, but it's in the physical world as well, and there are lots of different examples of this. And Pareto, who this is named after, he noticed that approximately 80% of the Italian land was owned by 20% of the population. And then he went on to survey other countries and found out it was similar. And he looked into he looked at other sorts of things. He looked at income distribution, looked at yields from crops. He looked at all sorts of different things and kept coming up with 20% of the effort, or 20% of the people account for 80% of what's happening. Now, what does this all have to do with networking? Well, I guess it does. You just, follow along, if you will. For those who don't know, I played college football, and it was interesting. In college, I don't know why I didn't think about this on the front end, but in college, the team was comprised of guys who were largely high school stars, team captains, all conference players. Everybody on, now it was a small college team, but everybody on the team had come from a small high school, or maybe it was a big high school, but they were the star and had done very well. And then they come into college. So in high school, they're kind of the 20%, right? Accounting for 80% of the activity, 80% of the yards, 80% of the carries, 80% of the starts, 80% of the plays, 80% of the tackles. And then they come off to college, and what was interesting is that there were 20% of the people accounting for 80% of the results. So it kind of, whittled itself down into a whole new population of 20%ers providing 80% of the results, and same sort of thing. All of a sudden, it was kind of at a different level, and 20% of the people were accounting for 80% of the production. There were guys on the team who started a lot, and there were guys on the team who carried the load, and then there were 80% of the team that didn't necessarily do a whole lot. They were special teamers and so on and so forth. And I would imagine then as the college players roll on into the professional ranks, it's kind of the same thing. You get all these stars in college getting picked up into the NFL, and not many college players go on to the NFL. But the ones that do go on to teams, and on those teams, 20% of the players are accounting for 80% of the results. Football's a little bit of an anomaly because there's lots of different results. I think if you looked in basketball, you would probably see it more has to do with scoring. It's probably a little easier to look at. And I would imagine that any cross-section of society, there's this dynamic where 20% of the people are generating 80% of the results, whatever those results are. I've often thought about the National Governors Association, or the National League of Governors, which is an American political organization that's the members of it are the governors of the 55 states, territories, and commonwealths of the United States. We have the 50 states. You have the District of Columbia. You've got Guam. You've got Puerto Rico. I can't name them all, but all total, there are 55 that comprise this organization. And obviously, it changes. Somebody doesn't get reelected as governor, then they're not in the club anymore. But there's 55 people, and if you start to do the math, let's call it 50 to make the numbers easy. 10% of the people are probably doing 80% of the work. 10% of the people are highly engaged and doing most of the work. And then there's probably that middle, what is it, 60% that's, they're accounting for quite a bit. And then there's probably the bottom 10% that does very, very little at all. And I find that fascinating. I haven't proved this out, but it's probably true because it seems to hold up everywhere else in society. Here you have the top leaders from all around the country. To become a governor of a state is no easy thing. You have to pay your dues in many respects, and then still have the people elect you, which you're likely against another political party. But these are leaders of leaders all coming together, and some are rising to the top, and others are kind of falling back. And so it's kind of an interesting dynamic, and I've thought about it often because, in any cross section of society, you have this. Probably have it somewhat in prisons, and I don't know what the production is of the 20%, but there's probably an aspect of the 80-20 rule. But I also see it in networking as well. I see it in networking, and in the general population. I don't mean that in the prison sense, obviously, but just in the everyday world, you have people you have 20% of the population that's doing 80% of the networking. And again, how that's measured, I haven't really. This is all just kind of all very theoretical in my mind. But you have 20% of the people who are doing the networking, the bulk of the networking, the bulk of keeping people connected, making introductions, and so on and so forth. But I've had the opportunity to kind of bring those 20%ers together. I've have a call it the networking hub, and invite in people who are these connectors. And it's interesting because here I'm bringing in, much like I'm taking high school stars and bringing them onto a college football team, I'm bringing on these networking stars from all over and bringing them onto a team of stars of networks from all over, well, really the world. And you have people who are kind of rising to the top, who are contributing a lot. And then you have others who otherwise are, great connectors, kind of falling back and not connecting as much. And I see that there are people out there within this group of uber networkers, the best of the best networkers. There are people who reveal themselves as truly authentic networkers, truly authentic. They're really trying to help other people. They really, really care. And then there's another segment, the 80% who are accounting for 20% of the activity in this really high-end group of Uber networkers, who tend to fall into a more strategic networking pattern. And I find it interesting. Not that they're not. I'm not saying they're bad people. Not at all. These people are all very well connected, and really try and connect themselves out in the bigger picture, the bigger world. But in this setting, they've kind of taken a step back and aren't as committed. And they're more strategic about what they're doing, about who they're inviting in and what they're doing. Whereas the cream of the crop, the 20% that are providing 80% of the new people coming to the group, and then 80% of the introductions and the production within the group, have kind of taken a step forward. And I just find it an interesting dynamic. Um, the lesson in here is, if you're, you know, if if you want to, if you want to stand out, you've got to try and become part of this 20%. Really, in any population, you've got to say, okay, what are the things I need to do to be part of this 20% and stand out and be part of contributing? And I've seen it in my life where, in high school, I was a contributor. I played sports. I was in student government. In college, yeah, not so much in student government. When I got into law school, really nothing at all. I was kind of, I did nothing. I went to school. But there were people I knew who were very involved in undergrad and were certainly involved in high school, involved in undergrad. And then when they got into law school, professional school, they kind of took that next step and they were involved in campus activities. I went to the Ohio State University, which is a huge campus. But they took a real step forward and became very involved, and it benefited them in lots of ways. So as you're out there working in different groups, you need to try and maneuver yourself. Maneuver is not a great word, but you need to try and, if you so want it, if you so want to stand out, you need to try and be part of this 20% that's generating 80% of the activity. Because I noticed when I didn't notice it so much in high school because it's hard for you to see the water you're swimming in. But when I was in college, I certainly noticed the people who were more involved ended up with more opportunities. They just did. And it was, I guess it's easy to kind of be critical of them. They're kissing up, brown nosers, whatever you want to call it. And I certainly noticed it in law school. There were people who were highly engaged, and they were in a better position to be introduced to other people. And if I had college to do over again, I would have probably tried to be more involved outside of just playing sports. If I had law school to do over again, I probably would have tried to be more involved than just being a student and coming and going to class and studying. Just kind of an interesting insight, something you need to think about as you're out there working with different groups, is that you can really step up your game, if you will, by trying to be that 20% that's generating the 80% of the activity. To wrap things up, remember, we're looking for some entrepreneur types, some enterprising entrepreneurial types, I should say, to join our team as franchisees of AmSpirit Business Connections. Our franchisees work with entrepreneurs, sales reps, and professionals in their area to help them become more successful through networking and the exchange of quality business referrals in a structured weekly morning meeting. This is a unique franchise opportunity, understand, because these meetings are in the morning, because they happen in the morning. This is for a successful business type that wants to add this on to what they're already doing. All of our franchisees do something else for a couple hours in the morning, a few mornings a week. Our franchisees work the AmSpirit Business Connections business model. The rest of the time, they're attorneys, accountants, realtors, coaches, and consultants of various kinds. The wonderful thing is that not only do our franchisees realize a financial gain from operating AmSpirit Business Connections, but the business networks that they create help build and develop the businesses, the business, their main business. It provides them referrals. It provides them contacts. So perhaps you know somebody this would be great for. Perhaps you are that somebody. Whatever the case, to learn more about the AmSpirit Business Connections franchise opportunity, please contact me using the email in the show notes or the one we provide at the end of the program.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.